Evening, Barbados. Since March of this year, we have been all grappling with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in many ways, we have been forced to make adjustments to the way in which we work, the way in which we attend educational institutions, the way in which we play, and the way in which we interact with each other. We've been fortunate, though, that from the outset of this pandemic, government has been taking the necessary steps to ensure that the public has been educated, that we're able to contain the virus, that we've protected our borders, and that we've been able to prevent, for the most part, community spread. As we become accustomed to what is quickly becoming the new norm, it has meant that we've had to widen the engagement with our stakeholders. And in the Ministry of Education, this has meant broadening our discussions with the union representatives to also include our international organizations, our teachers, our parents, and also our PTAs and our students in our discussions. Just a week ago, I concluded discussions with the respective teachers in our society. And I want to thank those teachers who would have participated in those discussions over the course of 3 days from across various institutions. They took time to engage with myself, ministry officials, Minister Cynthia Ford, and Minister Dwight Sutherland about the reopening of school and the protocols which needed to be put in place to ensure a safe reopening of our school environment. Our principals have also been working tirelessly to devise the best approach for the reopening of their staff and their students to be able to return to school. And just this morning, we were able to conclude some discussions with the Ministry of Transport Works and Maintenance to look at public transportation and the additional health and safety protocols that will have to be put in place, along with revisions to the scheduling of our buses. In the coming weeks, it is my intention to engage with the National Parent Teachers Association, as well as the executive members of the various PTAs, to give parents an opportunity to also contribute to the discussion. Let me take this opportunity to remind parents that they also have a responsibility to become actively involved in the Parent Teachers Associations, and moving forward, every school must have an active PTA. I had the opportunity yesterday to meet with the staff of the Wilkie Cumberbatch School, not only as Minister of Education, but also as constituency representative for the area. And I think it has perhaps enlightened me even more on the need for us to continue to engage in dialogue with all stakeholders across the spectrum and beyond our traditional stakeholders. Over the course of the next few weeks, as we look forward to the reopening of school on the 21st of September, it is my intention to ensure that we regularly brief the country on the new protocols and expectations for staff and also for our students. This briefing is therefore intended to provide you with a better understanding of what to expect as parents, teachers, and students prepare to return to the classroom environment on the 21st of September. Our initial discussions over the course of the past few weeks presented about 7 or so options on the return to school. We narrowed it down to 2 approaches, the shift system and also the blended approach. Based on all of the discussions that we've held to date, the preferred option for most of the schools has been the blended approach. And by blended, what do we mean? We basically mean that there will be an approach taken to learning for this next semester and perhaps going forward, where students will be able to have face-to-face instruction in the classroom, as well as also being able to use technology from at home to be able to learn. We recognize that the shift system, while it may be useful for some parents, there are some parents who have several children, and in many cases trying to balance the picking up of students from the various institutions may present some challenges. And over the course of the past few days, we have had a lot of feedback from our respective principals and also teachers and parents as it relates to the shift system. And I'm thankful that the parents have been communicating with the principals to be able to better advise them how to prepare for the start of the September term. I want to encourage at this point that the parents as well to ensure that they continue to dialogue and to provide the contact information, update the contact information rather at the respective schools, because over the course of the past few months, I believe you have realized that communication has been coming through the use of technology. In many cases, both the ministry and also the schools have been reaching out via email addresses. And I know in my recent meeting with the unions, they have asked me to re-emphasize the need for all parents to update their contact information, as well as move towards a position where contact email addresses are certainly utilized more by parents, and if they're not equipped to deal with it, to be able to provide persons contact information who can reach out to the teachers and to provide updates for their students. Our schools are therefore finalizing plans over the course of the next few days as it relates to what school will look like and how school will start to emerge. And many of the questions I believe that have been asked is as it relates to curriculum and what the curriculum will look like. Well, what I can say in respect to curriculum is that we acknowledge that there may be some challenges as it relates to ensuring that students do the entire curriculum over the course of the next 12 weeks, because I have also made the decision that the school term will also end on the 11th of December, giving you 12 weeks instead of 14 weeks. Now that means that some adjustments will obviously have to be made to the curriculum to ensure that, first of all, students on the return to school are in a position to be assessed by their teachers, because we suspect that there will be some deficits and some challenges that children may have encountered over the course of the past few months being away from school. And we want to spend at least the first 2 or so weeks with students and teachers, getting to reorient them into the classroom, also being in a position to figure out whether there are challenges that the students are having in terms of learning, whether they have fallen behind. And therefore, I would hope that parents would appreciate that if you are not hearing your children saying that they are doing the traditional curriculum in the first week or two, that there's a certain understanding that we are trying to find out where they have fallen behind and to be able to address any concerns that may have arisen. This approach, I believe, will allow students who require additional attention to be pulled out and to be placed in smaller groups for individual attention, or for collective attention with smaller groups where they can be able to interact and to work with their teachers one-on-one. It will also allow us to get a better idea of the challenges that children may have and how teachers may have to modify curriculum in the way that they teach and also in the way that children learn in order to be able to meet the needs of our students. Many persons have also asked about whether students will have to wear masks. I think masks have now become commonplace across Barbados. We have, from the outset, we've said, it's not necessarily mandatory, but it is advisable. And I'm pleased that Barbadians have been actually taking the necessary precautions, whether they're shopping, whether they are going to church, or whether they're going in any other public space. Schools, therefore, will be no different. It is advisable, obviously, that students will wear their masks, and we have made specific allowances for students and also teachers where there are obviously illnesses which may prevent them from being able to wear the mask for extended periods. In our discussions with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, they have recommended that desks be placed at least 6 feet apart if students are to remove their masks while in a class. And if desks are placed closer than that, then the mask must be worn at all times. So we've tried to find the necessary accommodations as much as possible, because we understand that students are different to adults. Students like to touch, students like to interface with their teacher, and it is obviously going to be a difficult environment for them to have to adhere to a number of these protocols. But we know that it is in their best interest, and I'm also asking that parents take this opportunity over the next couple of weeks to remind children of that we are still in a COVID-19 environment, that it isn't business as usual, that our teachers and management and staff of the respective schools are really trying their best to get them back into school in as safe an environment as we possibly can. But we are going to need some compliance on the part of parents and some encouragement on the part of parents as well to ensure that our students are able to return safely into the school environment. As it relates to the masks that have been secured for our teachers and our students, I know that many of you already have masks available to you. I see children all over utilizing masks and visiting various premises. And we encourage you to provide masks for your children, but we will also be supplying masks to both our teachers and our students. We've had a good relationship with our international partners, UNICEF, who have provided generous donations of masks. And I believe in the course of the last few weeks, a number of private entities have also volunteered to provide donations to us as well. And for that, we are thankful. We are providing face shields where those have become necessary. I think people are well aware that that is also an option if you are having certain challenges, and you can also wear the mask underneath the actual face shield. So accommodations will be made wherever possible, but we have to be reminded that we are still in a COVID-19 environment, and we have a responsibility not only to protect ourselves, but also to protect those around us. The schools will ensure as well that there are staggered breaks and lunch times for meals and for snacks. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't have children, obviously out of the classroom all at the same time, in the normal way. So we are encouraging not just for the eating in the classrooms to be done, but we're obviously, encouraging parents to maybe pack lunches as well instead of having visits to the canteens. We've also ensured that there will be supervision by staff as well of students during the lunchtime breaks. And I am mindful also that students, the students are accustomed to doing things a particular way, but we are going to have to continue to reinforce in our students that, again, it is not business as usual. I want to also speak to another issue, which is the issue of persons who may be able to assist our schools in being able to better organize the school day. And in particular, we've had a number of parent volunteers over the year. The numbers have started to decline in recent times. But again, I want to reinforce that our parents have a large part to play within the school environment and ensuring that even during this COVID period, that many of you may be able to assist as well the schools in providing assistance with the testing of temperatures, or even assisting in terms of volunteering to help teachers within the classroom. We have to get back to a society where there is shared responsibility, and perhaps COVID-19, as I always keep saying, has presented many positives, and I believe that the opportunity is presented for other persons besides the traditional players to play a part in participating in helping us to resume as normal an activity within this school plant as we possibly can. Many of our schools have had a number of upgrades to them over the course of this summer. The majority of the renovations have been completed on most of our school plants. In this last week, many of the contractors are bringing an end to the work, and you will start to see some refresher painting being done. You will start to see some removal of debris and stuff from the plants. You will also start to see a change in the environment as we prepare for the beginning of the school term. We've been working with our principals and the health and safety officers as well to make sure that if there are underlying concerns that which have not been drawn to our attention at this point, that we can work through with them those concerns, because in many cases, the plants have been closed up for several weeks, and we want to make sure that people are comfortable as they start to plan for the new semester, the spaces that they will be utilizing on the school premises. The one school which we've had to make some adjustments to, however, is the St. Giles Primary School. I don't know if many people are aware, but the St. Giles Primary School is a very old building. It's a soft stone building. And over the course of the past year, we recognized further deterioration in the roof of the main building, and a decision was taken to be able to renovate the entire main building. And we had to remove the roof, and now we are in the process of replacing the roof and ensuring that the interior is also upgraded. So when students return to the plant, not only will they have a new roof, but the intention is that our staff at the facility will also be allowed to be in better conditions as it relates to the staff room facility. Also, the ancillary staff will have the opportunity to have better quarters to be housed, and also our students will also return to a more comfortable environment, given that a lot of the flooring boards in the premises were termite infested and had basically created tremendous problems in the plant for a number of the wooden cupboards that exist within the plant as well. So we anticipate that the St. Giles Primary School we will have to make some adjustments, and discussions are going to be ongoing with the parents as we make the adjustments, possibly to the Barbados Community College, who is working with us to be able to try to allow those students to be housed there. But we will continue to update on that, but we know that we may not be ready to go fully back into the compound until at least early October or mid-October. With that said, we are going to make all best efforts to ensure that students are engaged, and we are mindful that we will have to make some other arrangements for those children as it relates to devices, to ensure that if they are working from home, that they're given the necessary devices that will be required for them to engage with their teachers off-site as well. That brings me to the issue of devices. I think this is an issue that has perhaps become high on the agenda, not only for government, but it has heightened the awareness by the entire public that technology really is the way that we're going to have to communicate, and that it's going to play a big role in terms of education going forward. And we recognize that there are a lot of students who were not able to access devices. I mean, Barbados, like every other country in the world, has been grappling with trying to access devices. We've been trying to grapple with ensuring that we can get the devices on island in a timely manner. And some of the devices even that were donated, many of them are still to come onto island. We're hoping that for the start of the term, the remainder of the devices that we need to have access to, that those devices will be deployed. And in the course of the next few days and weeks, the intention is to start the further distribution of devices that are in our possession. I think it is no mystery to persons that we've had several corporate entities, international organizations, private donors providing the necessary assistance across the country to assist us in being able to deploy these devices into the hands of students that were in need. But we're also mindful that there may be children that we may have missed. And regrettably, because children have been on vacation, in many cases too, circumstances may have changed in terms of having access to devices. So we appreciate that within the first 2 weeks or so, teachers will perhaps, through the principals, be informing us that there is increased demand. And we have obviously secured some devices from Kenya, where we are going to be accessing over 20,000 devices that will be deployed across the educational system over the next couple of weeks. I keep making the point that Kenya is not Trinidad. It is not right next door. And therefore, obviously, we have to procure those items from Kenya. But as much as possible, we believe that moving forward, because COVID no doubt will be with us for a long time, and we have to prepare ourselves with the technology to be able to allow our students to have the best opportunities to learn in the school environment. And therefore, while we know that we may not have devices for every single child, I think the point that needs to be made is that we are making best efforts, just as other countries across the world are doing, to secure those devices in a timely manner. And I think the investment of over 20,000 devices for students and teachers is a huge investment, but it is one that I believe has now become extremely urgent and extremely necessary. And therefore, over the course of the next few weeks and months, you can expect the deployment of those devices into the hands of our students. It therefore means that a blended approach does not necessarily mean a 50-50 approach, which would be 50% face-to-face and 50% staying at home and using technology. It means that each school will differ in terms of how the blended approach is deployed, depending on the number of devices that are available to students. And parents have to work with our administrators to provide information upfront and early so that certain decisions can be taken as it relates to the timetabling and the scheduling of classes as well. It is no longer going to be the norm where timetables are structured and the opportunity is not given for persons to weigh in as it relates to how that timetable is going to impact them. It is really critical that people understand that we are all in this together, and therefore the information and the data which is provided by our students and through their parents, and also by our teachers through their principals to the ministry, will help to drive the response that we provide to this current environment. And that is really critical as we move forward, because I know that in the past, obviously we had a rigid curriculum, we had a rigid timetable. But one thing that COVID has taught us is that rigidity now must become flexibility and accommodation more than anything in this time. I want to turn my attention to the issue of public transportation, because this morning we had the opportunity to meet with the Ministry of Public Works. Public transportation has been a major concern for everyone, I believe. The good thing is that because we have been able to contain our numbers, I don't think it is as difficult to imagine a Barbados public transportation system in which we will soon be able to see our students and our adult passengers being able to commute on the public service vehicles. We know that the reopening of school obviously will bring with it increased numbers of students on public transportation as students make their way on the buses to and from school. And our discussions with the Ministry of Transport have been very productive and very enlightening us and certainly supportive for the most part, because the intention is that with the additional buses that have been purchased by the government of Barbados, we are certainly in a better position than we were last year as it relates to providing vehicles for our students to be able to get to school. What is going to be required, however, is that our schools are going to have to provide information based on the timetabling to the ministry, and in turn the ministry to the transport board, so that the transport board is able to schedule the buses that are going to be required at the respective institutions throughout the day. In cases where schools have taken a decision that they may want to stagger the times, obviously we will need that information in order to accommodate them. But we have also focused on a number of schools, particularly in the country areas where we've had long-standing problems in terms of the supply of buses to those locations, and those areas will be given, and those schools will be given particular priority as it relates to the way forward. It is our intention to, in the future as well, to move towards a dedicated school bus service. And I know that the discussions have certainly started with the Ministry of Transport, and those discussions will continue. COVID presented us with some opportunities, and one of those opportunities was that we were able to work with private operators to augment the transport board buses, because obviously we at the time didn't have the number of buses that were required, and therefore we are able to certainly augment public transport for our students, because in this occasion, because we have already started the practice of working with the non-traditional operators and integrating them into the public transportation system. The Ministry of Transport has also advised that they will be taking additional safety protocols and putting those in place. They're going to take additional measures to address sanitization, because we recognize that with the increase in the numbers, obviously there will have to be additional protocols, and there will have to be more cleaning of vehicles. There may even have to be more locations where they are going to fog the vehicles before they are deployed back on the road to collect either students or other passengers. We believe that our special needs students, we have to pay particular attention to them as well, and special needs covers a wide spectrum of students. These are the students who across the world are most vulnerable and perhaps will have the more significant deficits coming out of this COVID-19 pandemic. They're often children who enjoy the face-to-face and require the face-to-face in order to be taught and also to learn. And we have specific protocols being created to address our special needs population. There are many parents who are a bit nervous, in particular, about sending special needs children who might have physical disabilities, or other mobility issues back to school. And we want to give them the assurance that being in school is actually better than keeping our children at home. It is only where better cannot be done that I believe that we should take a drastic measure to keep a child at home. But we will do everything that we can within the powers of the Ministry of Education to ensure that we work with you and the schools to have those special needs children back into educational institutions. During the heightened period of the COVID-19 pandemic, I had the opportunity to go into a couple of classrooms virtually, and one of them was a special needs school. And, in engaging with the parents as well who were in the classroom supporting their students, it became clear that many parents are presented with tremendous challenges as they try to cope with children at home who have special needs requirements. It therefore means that we have to do everything we can, a combined effort with all of the various ministries and certainly the entire team that we have here at the ministry to ensure that we can get these children back into school just as other children, but in a very safe way. And in that instance, we may actually require the assistance too of parent volunteers or persons who are trained in those areas. And those systems are being put in place to ensure that your children are safe and that also our teachers are safe within the school environment. Perhaps the biggest issue for everyone, I think, has been the question of sanitization of the school plants and whether we are going to hire additional staff, whether we are going to deploy people differently. And I think it is a combination of both at this stage that we have agreed upon, because we recognize that there are some school plants that have decreased their numbers, but in many cases they have a higher complement of general workers and maids. And we therefore need to be in a position to redeploy persons across the system to be able to ensure that we are able to sanitize the school plants, keeping in line with all of the respective protocols at this point in time. There will be training for ancillary staff. We started that earlier this year before we went back into school with the students who were sitting the 11 plus. And the intention is that I think on the 10th of September, there will be a training session for all janitors across the system to be able to prepare them for what is required and to provide them with the refresher that may be necessary to fulfill their obligations within the school plan. We have recognized also that while we have general protocols and we have protocols for special needs students, we have also had to work with the various stakeholders to devise protocols that would relate as well to our science labs, and we will also have to have protocols for physical education as well as for our music programs, because obviously many of these programs and disciplines require students to work closely together. They also require them sometimes to use instruments in the classroom, or in some cases to use equipment on the pasture. And therefore, the protocols will be separate, but also included as part of the overall protocols that we are providing for the reopening of school. Those protocols should be released over the course of the next few days. Again, just this morning, officers here, as well as the ministry, as well as our various union representatives have been in discussions, trying to fine-tune the protocols, because I think, as many of you can imagine, there's just no one-size-fits-all approach to this entire journey. And therefore, we have had to weigh in and to take the advice from a number of people, persons who are practitioners in the field as teachers, but also persons who generally appreciate and understand how difficult this situation is. And so we're trying to fine-tune those protocols. There are many protocols that are already in circulation. Bear in mind that Barbados is opening school a bit later than some of the other territories in the region. But the good thing is that Barbados already had its protocols in place for the 11 plus examination. And therefore, essentially, we are simply modifying some of those protocols and trying to make sure that with a blended approach to learning, that we're able to have certainly more face-to-face interaction in this next semester for sure, than perhaps going forward. So we'll work with our community centers. We're going to work with our faith-based organizations, because parents should also be made aware that in an effort to keep children in school, the school plans may not be able to accommodate all of the students that are on the roll. And therefore, in working with the respective ministries, we have come to an agreement that we are going to look at utilizing churches and also community centers to expand the school plant. Now, what does that require? It requires that the protocols, which I'm sure are already in place at community centers and our churches, will continue to be in place, because they are already providing sanitization. They're already engaging in temperature checks. They are already following all of the health and safety protocols, and therefore it is perhaps the easiest transition to make into these additional spaces. But in addition to that, we will also have to ensure that we have the necessary admin support, because persons will have to have access to Wi-Fi and to be able to use their devices if they need to work off-site as well. It also means that there will be some logistical coordination that will have to take place with our school meals department once the classes are done off-site. And those decisions in terms of making those spaces available are really down to the communication with our parents, our teachers, and also the management of the schools and the ministry. Because it may be the case that some classes, perhaps particularly some that are doing exams, might be better suited in a different space to be able to work with their respective teachers. But in many communities, we have access to both community centers and churches, and I firmly believe that we cannot use only churches at the times when we are having environmental issues, but we have to be able to utilize many of these facilities, particularly now, so that we can get our students in the face-to-face environment as much as possible. So those are just some of the, I believe, challenges and the concerns, the anxiety issues that many people are having as it relates to the reopening of school. And we will be communicating with the public over the course of this week. As I said before, we intend to speak with the Parent Teachers Association so that we can hear directly from parents as well. And we want to encourage persons to, again, just as we have had with other discussions, to be candid, to be very, very upfront about their concerns, so that we are able to tailor-make something for Barbados that certainly is of a high standard, and certainly one that other jurisdictions will possibly follow as well. We, I think, did a very good job when we were able to consult with our unions and our other stakeholders for the reopening of school for the 11 plus examination. We may not always agree on everything, but I do believe that there's consensus, particularly on this occasion, that we need to get our children back into school, and we need to do so safely for students and for our teachers as well. And it is with that common objective, whether we disagree or we agree on the fundamentals of our approaches, that I believe is allowing our discussions and our dialogue to continue in the manner in which they have been going. And I'm really grateful to the unions for continuing to engage in dialogue over the past few weeks. Just before I came here, we also had another consultation with them. And as I said, there is general consensus on the way forward. But as usual, we may not agree on every single detail, but I do feel that we're making significant progress by being able to talk to as many of our stakeholders as we possibly can. every day there is something that is we are presented with in terms of a different perspective that is causing us to rethink and to reconsider the approaches. As it relates to teacher training, for instance, we recognize that teachers were thrust into an environment back in March where they had to equip themselves quickly with the necessary tools to do emergency response teaching. Being mindful of that, we've put together a series of webinars and sessions to be done over the course of the next couple of weeks, and in particular for their planning week as well, which would give them some insight into how to better equip themselves for the online environment. And we will continue to offer those programs. I believe the Chief Education Officer at TIN has also been in discussions with a university in Finland, which is well recognized as one of the better educational systems in the world, and one where I'm sure that we will be able to forge deeper relationships with them in the coming months and years. And I am excited that we can partner at that level to be able to provide information to our teachers that will better equip them to be able to teach in an online environment moving forward. Will there be challenges ahead as we try to unfold and to unravel the reopening of school? I'm sure there will be. But as I said before, I believe that there is general consensus that it is better for children to be back in school than it is to keep them at home. And therefore, the only consideration that we all must confront is how to do this as safe and as healthy as possible to ensure that all partners and all stakeholders are comfortable when they return to school. One of the things that I remember our teachers asked me was whether, Minister, will you be flexible in your approach to the reopening of school? Because if we have to fine-tune something, will you be prepared to do so? And I've given them the assurance that we will, because we appreciate and understand that until you actually return to school, it is going to be difficult to say whether a particular system or a particular approach is going to be the right one. But what we, I think, have done is try to solicit as many views as possible in being able to roll out something which we think will be able to satisfy all of the parties that are concerned. So parents can expect the engagement and through the PTAs next week, and they can also prepare themselves for participation in parent-teachers associations that may not right now be active, but they do have a role to play in the reopening of school. And they need to have a forum as well to be able to express their concerns as we go forward. So we will update over the course of the next few days, and therefore you can stay tuned for further updates. But just as we did during the early stages of COVID, it is the intention of the Ministry of Education to not bombard you, but to keep you up to date with what is happening as we continue to unfold and to prepare for the reopening of school. Thank you.